Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Med School Minutes podcast, where we discuss what it takes to attend and successfully complete a medical program. This show is brought to you by St. James School of Medicine. Here is your host, Kaushik Guha.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Med School Minutes, where we talk about everything MD related with a focus on international students, specifically students from the Caribbean. Today we have a very interesting guest, and we have a little bit of a surprise with our host as well. But today we will be talking to Dr. Payanes and Dr. Kruer, who are from Sutter Health from Modesto, California, here to talk about their brand new family medicine and internal medicine residency programs. Every year we have student counselors who work at St. James. These are some of our best students who come in and just before residency spend some time with us. And every year we have one of these student counselors host a show for us. So today we have Dr. Sanket Chaudhary hosting the podcast on our behalf. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Payanes and Dr. Kruer, as well as Dr. Chaudhary.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kruer and Dr. Payanes, for joining us today. This podcast is called Med School Minutes. We're going to start off by a brief introduction about yourself and about your program.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having us. I'm Raeleigh Payanes. I'm a family medicine physician in Modesto, California, and I'm new to the role of program director. And we're building a brand new family medicine program here at Sutter Memorial Medical Center in Modesto, which is really aiming to meet the growing needs of the Valley. We need more primary care physicians in the area, so that is our mission. And I'm super excited to be a part of that.
And my name is Dr. James Kruer. I am the program director for internal medicine, and I'm also at Sutter Memorial Medical Center here in Modesto, California. And we're building a large primary care presence. We're taking this, we'll have 19 categorical and 7 prelim spots for the coming year, starting in 2025. We're a brand new residency.
Okay. And how about you, Dr. Payanes? How many spots do you have for FM?
We will have 13 per year.
Okay. And I know about Dr. Kruer a little bit, that he had previous programs before, right?
Yeah, I've built 2 other programs before. For some reason, I started out my career in medical education right after I finished residency. I was a chief resident, and I've had a lot of inaugurals in my past. I was an inaugural ambulatory chief resident, and I was a clinic director for many years. And then I helped build a program in Michigan. And then after 6 years, I started another program in Georgia. And now 6 years later, here I am starting a program in Modesto. So,
yeah, thank you. And you, Dr. Payanes?
Yes. So I graduated from residency in 2015 here in Modesto. And right away, I knew I wanted to continue teaching and wanted that to be a part of my practice. So I worked closely with another residency program here in Modesto over the past 9 years, and teaching both in the inpatient and outpatient setting, and predominantly with a focus in the women's health and labor and delivery, delivering babies with residents and participating with maternal infant care. And developing curriculum there. So I had a core faculty role there, and I think it taught me a lot about residency work and how to develop curriculum and how to be a better teacher. And now I'm excited to be in the role of program director and develop, I think, a unique type of program that's really focused on the needs of the community. So I think looking forward to that.
Amazing. Thank you. So these 2 programs are starting brand new, right? Any other programs or previous programs that are already there at Sutter's Health?
Not at our hospital.
Or FM and IM are the first ones?
Yeah, we're the first ones.
Not at your hospital, eh?
Correct. This is actually not uncommon, by the way. If you look across the U.S., there's quite a few places doing this. As I mentioned, I was in Georgia. They had a big initiative across the whole state there about 8 years ago, and a lot of hospitals got involved with starting new programs. And I know that this is happening in South Carolina right now. Texas has been busy building a lot of new residencies. Yeah, and California is doing the same. So, and California has been supporting this work since like 1972. Actually, they have some grant money that encourages hospitals to start training programs, and so California needs more doctors, and so a lot of hospitals are doing this. And Sutter Health is the latest one that's planning to put residencies in all of our hospitals. So, Memorial in Modesto is the latest place to go live.
We have some students that are like wondering about Modesto because when you think of California, you think about it being very expensive. So, is Modesto? Do we think it's more on affordable side?
Oh, so I think somebody's a plant in your student group. I was laughing and telling Dr. Payanes I'm going to start branding myself as the most affordable option for residency in California. So the Valley, Central Valley is the agricultural heartbeat of California. So, and a lot of folks from the Bay Area and stuff are building houses here in the Central Valley. So there's a huge demand for doctors, but they're all moving here because the housing's more affordable. So I'm not going to lie, if you're outside of California, it's expensive to live in California. But from a cost of living standpoint, the Valley is way more affordable than some of the bigger cities.
I've lived in California most of my life, and I've never lived in any of the big cities where the cost of living is much higher. But throughout medical school training, I did live in several different areas, and Modesto is definitely much more affordable, especially for the size of city that it is and the amount of entertainment and good restaurants and lots of different businesses. For what Modesto as a city offers, it's a very affordable place to live.
I like to say we're kind of an island that has everything here. We've got all the chain restaurants, all the shopping places. We have the malls. We have all that stuff. But it's just so easy to get around. The whole area is flats. There's not even any hills to go up and down. But it's beautiful and warm and sunny 9 months out of the year. So it's just amazing. Mediterranean climate, they call it.
Nice, amazing. It's close to San Francisco, right? Like, how far is it? Do you ever do residents go there? Or
yeah, it's like it depends on the time of the day. So it's like we just say it's about a 2-hour drive, but it's like 90 minutes if you go on a Saturday morning with no traffic. It's like a 2.5-hour drive if you go on rush hour at 5 and 6 in the morning. So it's a very easy drive on a weekend. It's actually a little tougher if you're commuting for business reasons.
So there, I was looking you guys up, and there was a new program, the sister program. I think Sutter is Roseville, if I'm not mistaken, right? They started 2 years ago. So some of our students were wondering, like in terms of fellowships, like how can the how would a new program help them get into maybe a competitive fellowship, for example, like cardiology, if they want to do that. So what are your thoughts on that? Or do you know any fellows from, or anyone interested in fellowship on your sister program?
Of course. So I've actually built programs that have started fellowships, and I've done that before. Roseville is about 2.5 years ahead of us on the trajectory. Roseville is one of Sutter's larger campuses, and they are the campus that's building probably the most variety of residencies. And now they are on the journey to build fellowships. So they are building a cardiology fellowship. I'm sure, are going to build pulmonary care and some other ones. They just can't announce them yet until they're accredited. But there will be more fellowships built there. Not clear yet if we're building any fellowships in Modesto, but to answer your question, how do you get into a fellowship? I think you can get into a fellowship from any residency you want to. It's just a matter of building your portfolio and work. So, you have to have a well-rounded portfolio of CV. You have to do quality projects. You have to do research, publish. You need to, show that you've done some volunteerism. And you can do that from any residency. It's probably easier actually from a do residency because you get to basically be the first person on the ground, and you can pick what you want to work with. You get to work at elbow with your faculty. Pretty easy to do that. We have a lot of cardiologists here, so it would be quite easy and feasible to get onto a project and do that with your mentor. So quite easy. But the challenge is most of the fellowships already have people hanging around hoping to get into their fellowship. So it's going to be much more FaceTime if you're trying to get to know the fellowship director. It's a little easier if you're actually from that residency.
Yeah.
But totally. A lot of fellowship directors I've met, they like to have a mixture of both people that trained within as well as people from outside, because they don't want to become what's considered inbred. So a lot of fellowships will pick from both in and outside of a program.
Would you like to say anything, Dr. Payanes, regarding that?
No, I think there's a growing number of maternal infant care and maternity care fellowships in the area and in California also. So I have had several residents and students, interested in some of those fellowship opportunities. Just like residencies, fellowships are increasing in number, which is really great for residents to have that opportunity to really focus their practice in what they are really passionate about. So I think there's no shortage of opportunity for fellowships for both family medicine and internal medicine.
Okay. And just on the same track, we have some students that are interested in the OB side of family medicine. Does your program have a lot of OBs or a lot of deliveries that they get to see?
Yes. So, that's one of my areas of interest. And so that's something I'm, very passionate about. And it's such a need across the nation, but especially actually here in our community. We've had many OB-GYNs leaving medicine from retirement or leaving the area. We're in such a crisis in need of physicians providing prenatal care and obstetric care, not to mention, access to contraception and, reproductive health options for patients. So it is such a huge need, and it's definitely a need that family medicine doctors can help meet. And so that's why I am very passionate about full scope family medicine and training all family medicine physicians, even if they may not want the lifestyle of delivering and being on call and that type of thing. Still, they can provide prenatal care and be very experienced with women's health and caring for newborns also, and postpartum care. So I think that's an important part of the curriculum. And we have excellent support here from our OB-GYN colleagues, and we are actively recruiting family medicine OB physicians. The hospital and the medical group are very supportive of that mission to meet that need.
Now we're going to talk about what's some questions that students had and try to understand program director's point of view. Since the application just opened up last week, right? So our students want to understand how the whole application review process worked. For example, do you download all applications on day one, or do you download them as you go on? Is it first come, first serve? How does the review process work?
Well, they come in continuously, actually. So if you have your application in advance, Eris actually the application review software, it holds your documents for 5 business days before it releases it to the program. So one piece of advice I'd have is start early, and students can enter as early as September 4th, I think this year was the day. So if you got it in early, when it opened to us on the 25th, we would see your whole application. If some of your pieces haven't been in there yet, like the letters or some other dean's letters, etc., those will trickle in as they get entered and uploaded by your faculty. And so we will look at applications as soon as they come in on day one. If we have a large number, which we usually do in primary care, it'll take us a while to work through those. And so if we see some of them are incomplete, we might hold them. and just come back later and wait for the rest of the documents to catch up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we start right away, but we are constantly reviewing. So if you look at my website, we actually post on there that we'll be reviewing all the way through January. And so, there's still an opportunity. We may invite some people who didn't apply right at the beginning, but then decided to join later and apply in October, November, December. So, Dr. Payanes?
Yeah, basically we apply, kind of a filtering strategy to try and prioritize specific qualities and characteristics that we want for our residents. So we started that like right on the first day, but like Dr. Kruer said, those applications are still coming in. Some of the applications that are actually in the system are incomplete, meaning they're still waiting for some of the documents to come through or waiting for the test results or something like this. So we do recognize that, and we know we have to keep capturing that data and keep looking back at it. So it's kind of like on a rolling basis, and honestly, invitations for interviews went out pretty quickly on day one, and we've just been continuing to, go through those applications with our process and offer interviews. We give applicants, a reasonable amount of time because we know medical students are busy and on different schedules and all of, different time zones. Give them a reasonable amount of time to respond to either decline or accept the interview position. And then they get scheduled. And we've had a lot of success already scheduling applicants. And also one thing that was really important to me was like making that process very transparent. So on our website, there's lots of information about exactly how we're doing interview season, what to expect, so that applicants can kind of get an idea if they haven't heard by a certain amount of time, or what our interview season looks like, so that they can kind of know whether to keep holding out and waiting and expecting to hear from us, or whether those interview slots have already been filled.
All right. So would you advise like someone to apply early, but with like an incomplete application, or wait a little bit and have a complete application and then apply?
I think, the best advice is to have your application complete on day one. I think that's like the best option. And if you're not able to have that for different reasons, sometimes it's out of your control, then I still think that having your application in the system as early as possible is probably the best way to go about it. That would be my advice.
Mm-hmm.
My advice is the same. I think you should always look to be there right at day one, but I wouldn't despair if you had to apply later. Like she said, we're used to seeing some applications come later. The other thing that's been in place for a couple of years now is signaling. So if you really want to be noticed, you should spend one of your signals. You get like 3 gold tokens, and I think it's 12 silver for internal medicine. So use one of your tokens if you want to get noticed, because a lot of programs have come to rely on that as a like raising your hand to say I want to be noticed. So.
That's a good point you brought up. So that brings me to like our next discussion point is you would probably get like a lot of like thousands of applications, right? Like you can't really offer all of them an interview. So what would be your initial filter if you had a filter? Would it be signals, or would it be their status, maybe non-USIMG versus USIMG or USMD, or their scores?
So that's a hard question. It's a little more sophisticated. The platform that we're using to filter through applications is quite sophisticated, and we can really identify like positive factors and negative factors, and you can create filters that have like multiple different characteristics that can be isolated. You also have the ability to blind certain parties who are reviewing applications from things like the applicant's photo, the applicant's birthday and age, gender, race, ethnicity. So there's a lot of, you can blind to history of felonies and convictions. You can blind to, so there's a ton of things that can be done. And, it's a bit of a complicated process, but the priority for me was making sure that we're minimizing bias as much as possible. And also identifying applicants who have a strong passion for primary care and community-oriented primary care, and also have what we make some assumptions like that people from the area might be more interested in staying here and be more connected to the community and desire to stay here as a primary care physician in the future. And that is something that's a big mission for the programs. So there's not one thing that we filter for or filter out. I don't know if that really answers your question, but it is quite sophisticated that you're able to create several layers of a filtering system to identify like candidates. Some of our filters, are isolating 80 to 100 applicants out of maybe 700 or 800, is to give an example.
I can maybe share a little bit of how things have evolved. So back when I was starting other residencies, we didn't have the signaling. So what would happen is you would start with people like from your state. So you would assume like maybe students from your state colleges, your state medical schools, your people who had a hometown address in your state. You would often filter for that, because you kind of assume they were going to stay in your state. And then you would maybe work to some surrounding states. So when I was in Michigan, we would go to Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and then we would sort of then go farther and farther. And I can remember looking for applicants in the filters, and I would get all these people from California, and I was like, wow, I don't know how to discern like which of these people from California are seriously looking to come to Michigan, and how many of them are actually just applying broadly just because they want to be considered somewhere. And so now that signaling is in place, it makes that a lot easier. So like if you're in New York or you're in Florida or somewhere and you want to move back to California, it's going to help you a lot, because now I can sort of take all that external applicants from other states and I can say, okay, this one has definitely got a reason they're trying to come to California. So the signaling helps us a lot to pinpoint people who are interested in being in your area. And I think, there is some assumptions that might be made if you don't signal, like maybe we're not one of your top 15, but on the other hand, that's not really true either. So we look at all applications. So it's not just about signaling, but the signaling does sort of particularly help if you're coming from across country and trying to get noticed.
Okay. And actually, I want to just say one other thing, because you mentioned filtering by like IMG or American graduate. And I do just want to say that I am an IMG myself, graduated from Ross University. And I know that I had an excellent education there, and I was a very competitive applicant. And historically, there may have been some different challenges that programs had to face with licensing for IMGs. And a lot of that has been eliminated in the recent, 5 to 7 years. And so I am, I myself do not filter out by IMG versus American grad at all. And it's much more kind of based off of like geographical preferences and just like I said, commitment to service, commitment to community projects, and, all different things that we select for. And then I will also just say that different programs will have different priorities. And in addition to us wanting people who want to stay here in the community, we also are prioritizing diversity for our program. That can be a challenge when we're blinding for things to try and minimize bias. But there are ways that we can, I'll say, select for things like applicants who speak additional languages, or, different things that might be helpful to actually being a primary care physician in our community here, where we have 50% of our patient population here is Spanish speaking. So those are some examples of the things that we can look at in the filtering process.
Yeah, I think patients like to sort of bond with people that can speak their own language, right? Culturally, they're very tuned to getting such, they don't necessarily appreciate always having to have an interpreter. So I can remember when I've hired, like, for example, Spanish-speaking doctors in the residence clinic, the patients were loyal as all craziness. They were like, oh, if the doctor wasn't in clinic, they'd wait till the doctor came back just to have a Spanish-speaking doctor, for example. So I think that diversity really matters. Here in the Central Valley, The logistics are quite diverse. We've got a lot of Spanish-speaking patients, but we've got probably 8, 9, 10% of the patients are from Pacific Asian, all different varieties, from Chinese, Vietnamese, and India, Pakistani, and you just name it. There's a very diverse community in California.
Yeah.
So we're always looking for everything, but we're always kind of thinking, how's that person going to be with patients, and are their communication skills excellent? Do they have empathy? Are they very professional? So there's a lot of different things we look for when we're selecting people, but we're always looking for people that are kind of camera ready on day one to do a great job with patients.
All right, awesome. There is one other thing I wanted to ask you about. Was a lot of students find it very hard to write a personal statement, and they kind of struggle to keep it within one page. So what do you look at when you're reading a personal statement? Like, what makes a good personal statement?
Well, I've done a lot of work on coaching students in this area. So I always just remind people that the name of the document should speaks volumes. It should be, number one, personal, and number two, make a statement. And so if it's not doing either of those two things, it's probably missing the mark. And so I've read many a personal statement that starts with a quote from Osler or starts with a quote from some famous person. And I'm like, I'm not reading it to hear from a famous person who's dead. I'm reading it to hear from you. So I always appreciate personal statements that are actually about you and tell stories about you and your past. I think a good personal statement should start with a hook. It's usually, a lot of them start with a case or an interesting patient that maybe help them decide that this is their specialty of passion. So, what was that personal case that made you decide family med or internal med is your thing that you want to do and make it your life's career? I also think that keeping it organized is important. So sometimes people just want to write like what I call a chronology, like, okay, I was born on this year, and then I went to grade school and high school. Really, what we want to hear about is like your attributes, your qualities, maybe your qualifications and experience that it's going to make you a great internist or a great family doc. So we don't want to know your whole life story. We want to know the key stories that are sort of defining moments for you and how it's helped you discern that you want to be a great internal medicine or family doc, for example.
Yeah, I think I would just echo some of those same things. It definitely helps if it is authentic and real. Sometimes vulnerability. It helps also if when reading it, I can see that the person who's written this has insight into their own challenges or their experiences, where they're coming from. Also, if there are challenges that have been faced in life or academics, I think it is a good opportunity to talk about them and be open about them and take accountability, or just share your experience with that. And because we're looking for all medical students, all medical graduates are excellent, capable students, and we really are looking for people who have excellent communication and interpersonal skills, able to build relationships, and people who are ready and open to have feedback and want to grow. And if you have a growth mindset, that's the most important thing that we need for residents. And if you can kind of share some of your experiences or challenges, but then show what that you've had personal growth from it, you've learned something about yourself from it, that's definitely better than hoping some of those challenges don't get noticed or brought up.
Right. That's actually a pet peeve for me. Actually, if I see a failed exam and then I don't see anything about it in the personal statement, I'm just like, I think I'm done. Like if we're not even going to talk about that, like if we're just pretending nobody's going to notice that on the transcript, it's just not the growth mindset I'm looking for. So I'd much rather see somebody say, I had a challenge and this is my analysis of why I think I failed that exam. And then here's what I did to change my study habits. Here's how I changed my, got through the personal challenge I was having, and then, show me how you succeeded. So for me, it's a real turnoff when people ignore it and just like don't even bother to mention it. So I think, if you've had a hiccup in your training, everybody has hiccups. Nobody's perfect, and we're not expecting perfection. So I think if you're trying to build an application and say, hey, I'm the perfect person, that also comes across as fake. So I think, like Dr. Payanes said, authentic and genuine is way better if you can manage to pull that off. And I know that everybody's a great writer. In fact, most people going into internal medicine are science-minded people, and they're better at math than in science experiments, probably. But if you can be articulate enough, to put into writing, what you learned from some of those hiccups, it's way more interesting for us.
Yeah. So how long do you think would be a good personal statement? Like, would it one page should be within one page? What if it goes over one page? Is okay?
To me, it doesn't matter much. I think it can be a little daunting because of just the sheer amount of information we have for each applicant. It's a lot to go through. But I mean, to me, I don't think it matters so much. You definitely don't want it to be, I think if it goes on to a second page, I think that's still probably reasonable. If it's more than that, going on to a third page or something, that might be like a little excessive. I actually am a writer on my, not in my non-medicine life. And I really enjoy writing, and I tend to just be very brief with my writing and like succinct. But, I think it just depends on the style and what we're learning about the applicant when we're reading it. And it doesn't, if it's a great personal statement, it doesn't bother me if it goes on to a second page.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think one page is a perfect one. If you go a paragraph or two over, not a big deal. I think if you're on 3 pages, we're going to probably shut down. When I coach people to write these, by the way, I suggest that you start with 5 paragraphs, an introduction and a summary paragraph, and then pick 3 things you want to say about yourself and put 3 paragraphs and sandwich it in between the opening and closing paragraphs. So if you can get it into 5 paragraphs, it'll be pretty normal and average. I think you'll and then the challenge is picking what do you want to emphasize about yourself. So like, some people usually start with like, oh, this is who I am, my character, this, I'm from an immigrant family, or I'm from a poor family, or I grew up in a challenging part of the world. For me, it was growing up on a farm. So I usually start with something that sort of identifies who's your identity. And then I'd say, somewhere in there, you got to talk about your love and passion for patient care. And I think somewhere in there, you should talk about highlights of successes. Maybe that's in research or in teaching, or something that's really you want to point out on your CV. And definitely do not repeat your entire CV because it's already in there. So do not waste any ink or typing in your personal statement about the CV, other than if you want to call attention to something and say, as you can see from my CV, I did research at this place, So definitely don't waste any extra words in the CV if it's already in the personal statement, if it's already on the CV.
All right. So the next thing is the students that applied this year, when would be like a good time to write like a letter of intention if they haven't received any interviews, for example, and they're interested in your program? Do you look at LOIs as a negative, positive, or what time frame should they look into, like, sending one?
That's a really interesting question because I don't think it's harmful to write, but I'd probably write to there's usually on your website typically a residency email. And I think that if you're not using that email of preference, that comes across badly. So if you're you're writing directly, you've managed to get the direct email to the coordinator, the direct email to the program director, I think that's a little bit annoying. It looks like you're trying to go around the normal route of communication. So I would start by writing to the actual website and the email for the actual residency. And the reason for that is many programs are big and they have multiple coordinators. And so they're constantly looking at those. Today might be somebody's day off, they're actually that email is getting covered by someone else. So use the preferred email for the residency. You'll probably get a quicker response than if you, for example, email my other coordinator who's off. She has to come back and catch up on email, and there's all these extra emails that somebody could have taken care of while she was away. So I would just say, it's probably not a bad thing to write, but it's become more transparent now. So like the family med directors and the internal med directors have all sort of said, this is kind of coming from the AAMC, that you should make it very clear on your website when invites go out. And so like some programs are down to the specifics, like we send it out on Friday at 3:00 or, so pay attention to the website first before you go ahead and write to them. And then also you'll see we maybe send them out every month until the month of January. So you probably shouldn't worry about writing that right now, because we're still very early in the season and still in busy reading mode. So right now, I think on our website it said we were going to start sending out October 1. So that would probably be too early to start writing at this minute, because we're still formulating all of that. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, the letter of intent is a new something new to me that I've learned about now in this role as program director. So I would just say it's not if I receive those, it's not negative, but it's not changing my filters or my characteristics that I'm looking for when I am deciding on who I want to interview. That's already been predetermined, and that's a standardized process, and we're trying to keep it as standardized as possible to minimize bias. So when I do receive those letters of intent or those emails with a lot of the personal information, personal documents kind of attached, like a CV or USMLE records, I just say, thank you. We'll be reviewing applications through ERAS, and that's kind of just the end of it. So it doesn't really impact on my end who we're interviewing, but it's not like a negative thing. I don't see it as a thing. Yeah.
Okay, well, not necessarily a positive thing either, right? Based on that,
right?
They're not gonna have more chances just because they sent you an LOI.
It doesn't influence the decision for me specifically, and I don't know how other programs handle that. And similarly, thank you notes after interviews. Those are a nice touch, and especially if you felt like a personal, connection with someone, I think it's fine to send like a thank you card or a note. But I think all of those things, we have to really try and be careful that because we're trying to minimize bias, we have to put up kind of some guardrails for those things, and we don't want those things influencing our decisions, right? So, I mean, it is nice and thoughtful to receive a thank you gift or a thank you card or something, but it doesn't influence our decisions either way.
Yeah, and they've gotten more clear from AAMC and ERAS that we shouldn't really expect those, so we don't really expect them. They are nice if you really do have that extra, you want to give that wow factor, but it's not required. So and so similarly, sending a letter of intent beforehand isn't going to get you noticed any better. You're still in that pool of names that we're working through. So I would say it's not going to help you, but it's probably a waste of your time if you're just hoping that it maybe gets you some extra looks. I suppose from a marketing standpoint, it probably does get you some extra look somehow, but I don't think, like she said, I'm not going to open the attachments, number one, and number two, my hospital's gotten so tight with the external email, it's flagging it already, like don't open this, and it's external, and so I almost think that you're better off to just go through ERAS if you want to send a communication, just because at least then the coordinator's going to read it, right? So you may not even get read if you send it through regular email, because the hospitals are so worried about malware and viruses now. So I honestly, I think you're better just to be very thoughtful about who you send it and when you send it, and just send it through ERAS to the coordinator if you're going to ask about where are we at.
Thank you. So next thing I wanted to talk about, like I've noticed a lot of people or a lot of programs are starting in-person interviews. Is Sutter Health going to do that this year, or maybe next year, or is it all virtual this year?
It will be all virtual this year, which is, in alignment with the recommendations from all the major, organizations within both the family medicine and internal medicine specialties. And again, that is a really important thing in order to make sure we're minimizing bias and also making sure it's financially equitable for all applicants who are interested to be able to have the same opportunity to interview. And, I think that that's really important. So I personally don't know that it will change for our programs, but certainly we're going to try and stay in alignment with what the recommendations are of those organizations that say like this is the best process. I don't know what you think, Dr. Kruer.
I'll give you some behind the curtains look, since this is an audience of students and applicants. I think as far as predicting the future, I never try and do that. Doctors are terrible at predicting the future. I think what I would say is historically, after the pandemic, there's a strong push, particularly in the primary care specialties, to stay on Zoom and to stay virtual. And the reason is that people realized it was so cost ineffective to do in-site interviewing. So, and actually a lot of places the budgets dried up. So there used to be big budgets for like having people to have banquets and dinners and go out to eat and things. And all those budgets dried up and they never came back after the pandemic. And so from an equity standpoint, I think there's a big pressure to stay on Zoom and stay virtual because it's more cost conscious for the program. It's more cost conscious for the applicant. And it makes the playing field a lot more level. So, but what I will say at the national level, at the program director meetings, a lot of community hospitals want to have on-site options because they feel like their little small town is so cute and they want people to experience that. And so there's this blended version that's in play right now where people are doing virtual with an on-site visit, usually at the end of the season around January, February, again, to mitigate the bias and the feeling that if I go and spend that extra money to travel there, that they're going to rank me higher. So most places are doing on-site visits because they still want the students or applicants to know this is a great place to live. And that's hard to get a feel for over the internet. Yeah. So I think you're seeing more and more places try to do blended. But I'm only speaking from primary care. I also see other specialties like surgical specialties and stuff. They don't really care. They're going to go all back to in person. So there are some specialties I know that are pushing and they're itching to go back to in person. And so I would say it's going to depend really heavily on the specialty. And it's going to really depend on how bad they feel that in person is needed to get a feeling of fit with the program. And I can imagine if you're going to be operating in an operating room with somebody a lot, why somebody in surgery might want to have an in-person interview for sure. But I think the evolution's going to go back to somewhere in the middle. But I think primary care specialties right now are pretty satisfied with being virtual.
Okay. So you mentioned site visits, right? Like, is it usually done after you finish ranking, yes. Or is it
most places? Yes, but I think
after,
there are some that'll do it a little earlier, maybe before they're done with the rank list. But typically, what they're going to do is you're not going to meet the PD. You're going to go to a site. You're going to go to a site visit. They're going to have a big conference room. They're going to give you some orientation talk, and they may have residents or chief residents take you around and show you the place. There's probably going to be some faculty or maybe associate program directors take you around. But I think you're going to see either it happens after the rank lists are done, or you're going to see they're going to have it on site, but you're not going to have a chance to meet the PD because they don't want the rank list to be biased or even perceived as being biased. So you'll see, I think, those two types of options most likely.
Yeah, I think those site visits really are they're for the applicant. They're for the applicant to come and see the community, see the facilities, and get a feel, a sense of how the people interact and how what the culture of the faculty or the residents, and when there's residents there already. I think that is really important. And I, as an applicant, long ago, I remember a lot of my decisions at that time were based off of just how people interacted, how people welcomed me, made me feel comfortable or not, how they spoke about and interacted with how the residents interacted with their faculty and how they spoke about their faculty. So I think, there's value in that, definitely. Um, it's fun. It's like a fun social activity to have, these social events happening during interview season. I remember that fondly as a resident too. Um, but I think its purpose is really to help the applicant kind of get a feel for the community and the program and the people and make their decisions. And so, not for us as a program to get more information or to influence our decisions about ranking in any way, right? Because ultimately programs should be selecting applicants based off of their qualities and the characteristics they need to be able to be a physician. And so for that reason, we are choosing to, for family medicine, have the site visit or the socials only after the rank order list is finalized. And also that means I can come and hang out with people and socialize. So,
Oh, excellent. So yeah, that's coming from like a student point of view, one of the biggest fear we have is like if we don't go visit to do a second visit, we're not going to match there, right? So it's good that you cleared all these misconceptions. Last two questions. I had two more questions. One was regarding J1. Do you think for like like Canadian IMGs or someone from international non-US IMGs, are you planning on doing J1 in the future for future applicants?
That's a really interesting question. So I've done a lot of work in the past with like the ECFMG, and I've been a big advocate for why we need to have J1s in the program. I personally think residencies are much more culturally rich and diverse when there's J1s in the mix. So I'm very much not opposed to having J1s. And J1s don't really cost the program that much. That's why you'll see a lot of places say like H visas need not apply, but J visas welcome. So I think there are a lot of residencies that welcome J visa holders because the ECFMG is the sponsor of the visa. And so it doesn't really cost the residency that much to do that. So I think that's why you see J1s are generally more welcome than H visas in many places. I think they add a lot of diversity. I think they add a lot of options to bring in variety of people. So I'm not opposed to them. But I am going to say, going back to one of the very first questions was how do we filter? Most places do what they call holistic review now, and they're going to write a mission about what they're trying to do. And so you really do want to pay attention to the mission of the program. And so, and you should think about how does my experience as an international grad or somebody who's on a J visa, how will that help that program that I'm applying to? Because, for example, if I say I'm looking to hire a lot of Spanish speakers for the Central Valley because 52% of my patients speak Spanish, and you're on a J visa and you speak Spanish, you should use that as a way to introduce yourself as to why you think you would be a great applicant for my program. Similarly, if you look at programs that maybe serve like an African American community and you're coming on a J visa, say from Nigeria or someplace in Africa, you should emphasize that you could bring diversity for your patients in that residency. So I don't know. I kind of have this sort of thing about when people lump things together. It just sort of rubs me a little bit on the edge. Like it's not about the visa at all. It's actually the visa itself. The visa itself doesn't cost me that much money to have a J visa resident. So I'm really. It's not about the visa. It's about what do you bring into the program from a holistic standpoint. And I think the problem is folks from international think there's like it is definitely harder to get noticed and get in, but it's not impossible. You just have to do a little more research to find the programs that accept J visas. So for both of my prior programs, we accept J visas, and we had a lot of great diversity. We had folks from the Middle East, folks from India, Pakistan, Asia. We had folks from South and Central America, Africa. So I think, look at the program's website, look at who are the people that are already there as residents, and then definitely, look and see, what are they selecting for, like in my programs, we tried to do diversity across the continents. So like we would try to make sure if we were going to invite J visa holders, we were usually trying to make sure we were distributing across the continents, and being not, instead of just going into one country or one school or one type of applicant, we would try and make sure we picked invites for a variety of different parts of the world. But I think your chances are better if you can align, maybe you're from India, but you speak Spanish, and that would be a good attribute to sell to me as a person studying a residency in the Central Valley. There's a lot of diversity in people, and helping me see what's that diversity that you can bring to the table is that's what I'm looking for in a J visa holder.
Ultimately, we can advocate for the things that we think are important for the programs, like as program directors, but that decision of whether to accept or sponsor visas is ultimately it is a decision made by the sponsor institution or the organization as a whole. So just to keep that in mind, it's not just a decision that us program directors are making.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Last question that I had before I'll let you guys go was, do like PD talk amongst each other? So if a student applied to both IM and FM at your program, would you guys know? And is that like something you'd be like, no, they're not interested in either, or would that be a negative?
I don't think it's a negative. It hasn't. Of course, we talk, and Dr. Kruer is like a mentor for me, so he's helping me in this new role. So I get a lot of advice from him. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if there were applicants who were very interested in this program here in Modesto, in this community, who have their families here or their support system here. If they were interested in primary care and they thought both they could have that career in primary care, through both internal medicine or family medicine, that wouldn't be surprising to me. It's not necessarily like a negative thing, I don't think. Sometimes I think what I see is more applicants who maybe are really interested in that OB-GYN residency, and then they're using like family medicine with some OB care maybe as like maybe they feel a less competitive, easier to get into option. I think that is, it's a little different than someone who's just wanting primary care and wanting a specific geographical region. I understand that because as an applicant, I had family already. And, sometimes it's not option, like it's not an optimal option to have to move your family like across the country or, to another state.
Yeah.
So I think it's multifactorial why people are deciding which programs they're choosing. And to me, if somebody is passionate about primary care and they think they can do it both with internal medicine or family medicine, and they just want to be here in their community, to me, that doesn't, that's not a negative thing. But we have separate sign-ins and a separate process. And so we're not really discussing or looking for those applicants in any way. But we do have a lot of students who come through who maybe have expressed interest in both programs. So I think it wouldn't be surprising to see some overlap.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think you shouldn't assume that it's completely separated. So, and I'm probably not, like, I think people who've done a sub-I here we're going to look up and see if you applied, and if you didn't, then did you apply to the other program? But honestly, I think coordinators talk more than the PDs do. So I think coordinators often, they often sit together and they share duties and errors, and so I think it's much more likely the coordinator is going to notice that you applied to both places than it is the PDs. And I think it doesn't necessarily come across as a negative. I think you do have to sort of show your love for, and like Dr. Payanes said, Modesto is kind of out here in the middle of the Central Valley. There's only one other residency sort of in town, and so basically you don't have very many options. So if you want to stay in Modesto and do primary care, you got limited options. So it wouldn't surprise us at all if you're applying to both FM and IM. Not a surprise whatsoever. And I do think that you have to be able to explain it though. So like if you're interested in OB, obviously, why are you applying to internal medicine? So if you don't get FM with OB, what is it? How are you going to be happy? Like, you're not going to see any kids. You're not going to see any women with babies. I mean, it's so you have to kind of know who you are, and you have to be able to explain, who you are, who you want to become. So. For me, I did med peds, by the way.
Right. I think that concludes. Yeah.
No, I was just.
Was it really? Okay.
Yeah, my background was med peds, so I actually couldn't decide either. So I applied to med peds so I could be both, and ultimately I ended up doing internal medicine after the long run. So.
Oh, nice. Thank you so much once again for joining us today for this podcast. Really appreciate it, Doctor. We really appreciate your point of view, what you do when all the applications come in, what you look for, all your advice that you gave today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Payanes and Dr. Kruer, for giving us insight into what goes into running a medical program and why you started your internal and family medicine programs. And thank you so much, Sanket, for asking the really burning questions. We always thought it was a great idea to have somebody who is in the shoes of a potential resident to host this show, just so that we could get the relevant questions out there. But again, as always, if you liked our show and if you liked our content, please download more at any of your favorite podcast providers and give us a follow and give us a like. It goes a long way for us. A lot of work goes into putting this together. And always remember, there is no shortcut to becoming an MD. Also, if you have any specific tips and tricks that you think would be helpful for our future residents for the upcoming math season, don't forget to put it in the comments. And also, if you think Sanket was a better host than me, don't hesitate to comment on that as well.
Thank you so much for tuning into our show. We hope you enjoyed another episode of Med School Minutes. If you like our content, please follow us and receive notification when a new show is posted. This podcast is brought to you by St. James School of Medicine. For a video version of this podcast, please check us out on sjsm.org/video.